Life Audio.
But to think about how homemaking can be a work in process and even kind of a form of sanctification as we're trying not for perfection, but just to grow a little bit at a time.
If you're looking for some inspiration and encouragement, I would love for you to check out Words of Life, the Salvation Army's 15-minute weekly podcast. We kicked off the new year with an incredible series from Natalie Runyon, worship leader, pastor, and founder of Raised to Stay.
What I learned in that time was that what felt like exile was actually an exodus, that the Lord was pulling me out of something to prepare me for something new, and how I responded in that season mattered.
And starting February 23rd, we're joined by professor and author Dr. Craig Keener. He dives into some of the miraculous cases explored in his latest book, Miracles Today, and he shares his journey from atheism to follower of Christ.
One of the things when I was coming to Jesus I had to reckon with, Christianity doesn't rise or fall on Christians.
Yeah.
It rises or falls on Jesus Christ.
Listen to Words of Life on your favorite podcast store or visit wordsoflifepodcast.org.
The ship's drifting out of control. Get out of there now.
What happened? His cord snapped. Some called it impossible.
Okay, Dave, I don't know where I am.
Others call it a miracle.
He's not. No, he's not.
Focus Features presents the inspirational true story.
I got an idea
that kept the world breathless.
This isn't working.
You can do this, buddy.
Starring Woody Harrelson.
Now!
And Simu Liu.
I'm not losing a diver today.
Last Breath, based on a true story. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Only in theaters this Friday.
Hello and welcome to the Encourager Podcast, where we have encouraging conversations to help you joyfully harmonize your home and work life. I'm your host, Rebecca Scott. I'm a wife, mother, designer, coach, and author. I'm here to help encourage and empower you to confidently make decisions that work for you and your stage of life, whatever that might be. Hello, encouragers. Are you ready to stop managing all the overwhelm and finally create some systems that bring more joy to both home and work life? Join my 10-week encouraging cohort kicking off April 2nd. Together, we're going to tackle the 5 systems: me, food, family, work, and home, so you can ditch the chaos, gain some clarity, and move forward with confidence and joy. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Enroll now at theencouragerpodcast.com, and let's build some systems that serve you and not exhaust you. Hello, encouragers. On today's episode, I have a guest, Charity Gibson, who's going to talk to us a little bit about parenting, a little bit about mom guilt, and a little bit about how traditional values are still really valuable and how we can kind of weave those into some of the practices of the world, but holding strong to why they still matter within our families. And you know that I love to talk about our families and how to create a family system and how to live the legacy that we also want to leave behind. Frequently, we know what legacy we want to leave behind. Like, we can romanticize it and like, this is what I'm going to leave behind. But frequently, we're not actually working towards that or living that. And so I love to bring guests on that will tell us just about parenting altogether. And what a good time of year to do it also as we move into, transitioning into spring weather and just like going through the cycles of parenting where you're like, we're killing it, we're doing amazing. And then you're like, oh gosh, we actually really need a lot of help. And so welcome, Charity Gibson, to the podcast.
Hey, Rebecca. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay, tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. So I recently released The Working Homemaker, and this is a book, kind of like you said, it's about our families, it's about motherhood. But as I was trying to figure out how to write it, I realized that I also wanted to hone in on things that I've experienced as a mom, which does have to do specifically with my experience as a working mom. So I have worked since before my littles came along, and then through my pregnancies and deliveries and all of that child rearing since then. But I noticed that there aren't a lot of resources out there specifically for Christian moms that deal with that nuance of working outside the home. Mm-hmm. And it's not that working outside the home is better or worse, but there are certain specifics with that sort of a lifestyle. And so I really wanted to find a way to kind of talk about things that I've learned through my specific set of experiences as a way to reach women that are in a similar life stage, and that their perhaps daily in and out kind of relates and resonates with that idea of being a working homemaker.
Yeah. Tell me what you think a working homemaker is.
Well, what I noticed is that oftentimes those two ideas are not seen as being complementary to each other. That oftentimes if you look at social media or you look at various books and things that have been written, the idea of a homemaker is someone who is not involved in employment in any way, that they are kind of full-time focusing on rearing the family, raising the family, taking care of what happens at home. And though women that are doing those things absolutely are homemakers and absolutely are doing really important work inside their home, I also wanted to find a way to look at homemaking as something that can bring women of all sorts together. That moms, whether they work, whether they do not, that homemaking is actually something that can unify us and give us a shared purpose and vision in our role as Christ followers and women that are trying to raise and rear our families well.
Yeah. So tell me this, because there are the extremes. It's like if you're a homemaker, then you solely focus on your children and homeschooling, and that is your job. And believe me, that is a big job. I can only imagine. But you're right in that the resources for doing both, homemaking, being at home, raising your children while working, are less.
It really surprised me, actually, how much less. I was looking for titles that specifically in the title clarified that it was a book for working Christian women, working Christian moms. And I could only find 2. I think I've stumbled across one more since then, even though it's not in the title, it's in the content. And my guess is that part of that is from a desire not to pit women against each other, which is very important because we have the mommy wars that really did kind of pit working women and stay-at-home moms against each other, as if one was the right choice and the other was somehow lacking if they didn't do that. And so I think the church recognized the problems with that, with pitting women against each other instead of working to unify them. But there's kind of this fine line in being okay to talk about a choice that someone makes and giving resources that can help them do that choice well versus creating it as if, okay, there's one right door to choose. Right. Good luck.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, and I didn't even know any different when I started. I just know that my listeners have heard it frequently. I had this story with my son, 18 months old, and my business, 18 months old. And we had a falling out, so to say. And I realized in that moment, I don't want to choose between the two of these. I don't want to just work and then be a terrible mother. And I didn't want to be an awesome mother and be a terrible business owner. I wanted to do both. And so the reason this whole podcast exists is because I set it on a mission to create these systems. So I didn't know any different. I just created the resources. But it's super interesting to hear you say, no, you set out to find some resources and there was very few out there.
Yeah, and I do think that podcasts like yours are doing a great job of encouraging women in this, and there do seem to be, yes, go Rebecca. There do seem to be certain spaces where maybe, in podcasting or blogging, certain conversations are happening that for whatever reason in the book industry, it seems to be a little bit lagging to catch up with that.
Okay, well, thank you for pointing it out because I wasn't even aware, and I'm glad. I will keep recording, you guys.
Please do.
I think you're really going to enjoy Charity's book as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. How can we guard our family time after work and school? So let's say we are managing our homes, but we're also working. How can we kind of guard that time when we do? For me, it's like shut the studio lights out. How do we guard that time to keep it sacred for our families?
Yeah. I think each family probably looks a little bit different in, what exactly after school and work hours looks like. Thinking about, does the husband have a traditional schedule? Is he home around 5 or 6 o'clock? Or is it, something where there's a modified weekend or travel? And so for us, because my husband and I both do work kind of your traditional work days, we do have the evenings and we do have the weekends that we can really capitalize on. Though I don't think that's the only way to do it. If someone works an overnight shift, maybe it's capitalizing on late afternoon and early evening. And so I've kind of learned, I think it's less about kind of mandating it has to be these hours. And instead, just making sure the time happens somewhere. And wherever that time happens, really it's being proactive against all of the additional things in terms of busyness with extracurriculars and all of the other opportunities, which can be really great in moderation, but it doesn't take long before they've filled up your evening and they've filled up your calendar.
Mm-hmm. Charity, remind us, do you work from home, or you said you have a traditional job? Tell us about that.
So I'm a college professor, and so I do go into the office every day, and I'm teaching my classes live, and I'm holding office hours and trying to do a lot of that grading and lesson planning at work. However, there's a lot of papers to grade. And so one of the ways that I do try to protect our family time is to not work a lot of overtime. That when it's time to go home, that's something that I can take with me. And I might have to pull it back out in the evening once my kids are asleep or, during part of a weekend. But that's one of the ways that I think physically being home when they are does kind of help make sure that we're having that time to connect.
Yeah, I think removing the guilt from it too, because I always talk about, there's going to be seasons. So there's seasons when the grading, I imagine, is more heavier than other seasons. So tell me this, you are the professor, you have your family, and you started to look at how to homemake, but you couldn't find resources on homemaking and working. It was like one or the other. You could find the resource on how to be a really great homemaker or find the resource on how to be a really good professor, but not the both of them together. Is that what spurred you writing a book?
I think so. Yeah. One of the things that I say early on in my book is that really my front and center audience was me 10 years ago when I was really searching and looking and trying to figure out what exactly can or should this look like. And what's been so interesting and refreshing through publishing this book is just having conversations with other women who say, yeah, that's me too, or I resonate with this. And so even though it's been rather difficult to find maybe the formal imprint resources, I think it's something that women have actually been doing and talking about for a long time. And so I would certainly not claim that I've invented this here, that that it's gleaning from this wisdom that, a lot of people have been putting out there in various forms for a while now.
Yeah. What is your definition of homemaking?
My definition of homemaking is really less about the cooking and the cleaning and the ambiance, and it's more about the people and the soul formation that's happening at home. So for me,
I love that. Mm-hmm.
It's about nurturing the people and the relationships. I think that really gets to the heart of homemaking.
Yeah, I think that's so true because, again, we could go to those dichotomies where it's like we eat dinner at the table and all of us are there. And I'm trying to think of all the other traditional things that are like, okay, yep, they're really good homemakers. I'm like, gosh, it looks so different for so many different families. And it's not that it's any more holy if you do it one way or the other. So I think it's really important that we're flexible with what homemaking looks like for our current families and if we're working or not, but also that it can still glorify God in a beautiful way of the skill sets that you have for your homemaking. If cooking supper every night is not one of your skill sets, but the spending the time with them and still securing, I think you called it soul formation and spending that time with them, you could be killing it in that department. So I do think we have to be flexible in our idea of what homemaking is for our individual families. Do you agree?
Oh, I completely agree with that we're all going to have things that we naturally do well, and then we're going to have those other things that we have to give ourselves some grace for.
Sure.
If you're looking for some inspiration and encouragement, I would love for you to check out Words of Life, the Salvation Army's 15-minute weekly podcast. We kicked off the new year with an incredible series from Natalie Runyon, worship leader, pastor, and founder of Raised to Stay.
What I learned in that time was that what felt like exile was actually an exodus, that the Lord was pulling me out of something to prepare me for something new, and how I responded in that season mattered.
And starting February 23rd, we're joined by professor and author Dr. Craig Keener. He dives into some of the miraculous cases explored in his latest book, Miracles Today, and he shares his journey from atheism to follower of Christ.
One of the things when I was coming to Jesus I had to reckon with, Christianity doesn't rise or fall on Christians.
Yeah.
It rises or falls on Jesus Christ.
Listen to Words of Life on your favorite podcast store or visit wordsoflifepodcast.org.
The ship's drifting out of control. Get out of there now.
What happened?
his cord snapped. Some called it impossible.
Okay, Dave, I don't know where I am.
Others call it a miracle.
Son, no, he's not.
Focus Features presents the inspirational true story
I got an idea.
that kept the world breathless.
This isn't working.
You can do this, buddy.
Starring Woody Harrelson
Now!
and Simu Liu.
I'm not losing a diver today.
Last Breath, based on a true story. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Only in theaters this Friday.
And I would say, even though we do have to extend grace to ourselves, maybe thinking about something like a housekeeping detail, like doing the laundry, that's never going to be therapeutic for me. It's always going to be a chore. However, I can still see the value of working to get the laundry folded and put away, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, it's just always going to be in a pile on somebody's bed, and that's just how I am. And so for me, it's both embracing what I know about myself, but then also trying to push myself to do better. Maybe not to be perfect, but to think about how homemaking can be a work in process and even kind of a form of sanctification as we're trying, not for perfection, but just to grow a little bit at a time.
Yeah. I always ask yourself, what does done look like for you in your laundry system? Because I think it's different in the different stages of life too, right? When they're really staining their clothes a lot or the teenagers or whatever it looks like. But determine for yourself what done looks like, but refer back to it because, a year later or 2 years later where you're like, no, this is at a fever pitch. I don't no longer want it just in the clean basket in their room. I actually want it in their drawers in the room. So now you're done, if you will, in quotation, looks different. So in your laundry system, that's what I always encourage is remind yourself, what does done look like in the season right now? So that there's not this high expectation, but you also communicate it to your family hey, my version of done is this because it helps me relax and be more present in the moment to enjoy other things other than the chore of laundry.
That is so helpful. And one thing I'm realizing when thinking about being a homemaker is also realizing that doesn't mean being super mom and having to single-handedly do it all. So more recently, I've been letting go of some of the reins of laundry. And, the oldest has been putting hers away. I still wash it, but has been folding hers and putting it away. We're moving a little bit more toward that with my 7-year-old and 9-year-old. And sometimes I open the drawer and something's inside out or it's in the wrong spot. And so, you've got to deal with that. But I think it is easy when we hear that term homemaker to also think of this woman kind of single-handedly doing everything. Whereas I think part of homemaking can be learning to delegate and or showing our kids how they can learn these skills and take some ownership in that.
Yeah, managing the household. Not just doing everything. Oh, for sure. If you opened up the drawers of my kiddos, I'm like, okay, take a deep breath. They did put away their own socks. No, none of them match, but she sure seems to think she did amazing. So I don't want to squash her confidence, right?
She won't be going barefoot.
Right. Yes. Oh, no promises with that kid. She'll always be trying to get away with it. So if we get our homemaking dialed into a level that feels good for us during whatever that stage of life is, why do we still have the mom guilt? And do you have any advice on how to reduce that?
That's such a big question. Yeah. I think mom guilt is unfortunately something else that unifies most moms together is that we're all dealing with it in one way or another. And for me, I think it's been giving myself grace, again, to not have to necessarily match a caricature in my head of what this perfect mom is supposed to look like. And even really diving a little bit into the research and the history about motherhood. And sometimes we have these ideas of what does a traditional homemaker look like? And a lot of us will think about a 1950s woman wearing an apron and heels and pearls, and she has dinner on the table by the time her husband and her children come home. But if you dig a little deeper into history, what we see is that with things like the Industrial Revolution, where work became separated from the home for many people, that's really the point in history where men left the farm or whatever enterprise was happening at home to go work. And from that point on, women were staying home on their own with their children. And so for me, that was helpful to see some of the history, to go all the way back to the Bible and to read about the Proverbs 31 woman, or Lydia, the seller of purple cloth in the New Testament, and seeing, wow, these women were actually working homemakers.
Yes, they were.
And yet they have all of these traditional values, or what we would probably call those traditional values of having their hearts toward their husbands and their children, yet also being wise and industrious in their employment. And so for me, that helps reduce the mom guilt, is say, okay, some of these things that we think of as being traditional or that we think of as being the correct way might not be telling the full story of the way that women throughout history have mothered well. And so why am I holding myself to this standard because I have an image in my head that goes along with it, or whatever other reason that might be that we kind of put that on a pedestal?
Gosh, that's so true. That is so true. When you look back, they were very entrepreneur in spirit too. Skip the industrial decade or whatever, but go back before that. Those women did a ton of amazing things. I also think when we can involve our children in as many appropriate decisions as possible with our work and with our time, can be really fruitful for them to understand like why mommy is shipping. For example, for me, like, okay, girls, we get home from school today. We're going to take a break, but it's going to look a little shorter because mommy has to ship today. Would you like to help me? Well, maybe. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But why are we shipping today? Well, our gal is on vacation and I just wanted to make sure that the shipping still goes out. And that's important because I'm serving customers. That's how mommy stays in business. So sometimes the more details I can share about the why of my work, the more they want to be involved, or at the very least understand why it is still important to also do my work.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right that our kids can understand a lot more and actually are interested sometimes in more than sometimes we give them credit for.
Yeah, and I think it's pointing out, like you said, when you're reading your Bibles, you're doing your devotionals, all the cool, amazing things that women get to do, not just the homemaking, but also all the cool things that God lays on your heart, whether it's creating lesson plans or creating a really cool meal plan. Doesn't matter, but pointing out, like, I think God really blessed me with this special skill set, and I love sharing it with you guys. Like, just making them aware of the things that also bring you joy is super important. It reduces the mom guilt, I swear.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about another important chapter in your book, and that is co-parenting with our husbands. So we've kind of set up, that homemaking can look different. It can also mean that you work outside the home like you do, and it can also mean that you still prioritize things at home. How do we get our husbands involved with more of this co-parenting lifestyle, and not in the world's way? Because I think there's a lot to be said about that too.
Oh, absolutely. I have one particular chapter in my book, which I titled, Let Him Parent, Not Just Play and Provide.
Oh, good play on words.
Yeah. And so really kind of what I looked into is thinking about what are the messages that our culture is showing about masculinity and about the father's role in the family. And especially if you look at a lot of the sitcoms, that, dad is kind of there for comic relief and he doesn't have a whole lot to offer. And it's mom who's capable. And, I think that can really have a negative effect on families because it teaches everybody. It teaches men that they are somehow not equipped. And then it teaches moms that sort of, okay, I guess I do need to carry all of this. And then it teaches the kids sort of like, okay, dad will bring home money and he'll play with us. But when we have a real problem, like we go to mom to solve that, which is so, contradictory to what the Bible tells us, which is that men are supposed to be leaders in the home. But if they are not respected there, then their leadership is not going to be valued. And so for me, I really try to think about what am I doing in our home to show our kids that we do value their father's leadership and that he does have things to contribute. And of course, they know that when it comes to if something's broken, he's going to fix it. But beyond that, having him periodically be in the kitchen and cooking a meal, they see that. And they see a form of his capability in a different way. Same thing when he's, helping a younger one hop in the shower or whatever it is that, okay, it's not just that dad performs well at work, but that he also has a lot to offer in the space that we share with each other at home.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's visually seeing those things as well. Like we can talk, but we know our kids don't want to be lectured at. But when they can see dad helping with some of the day-to-day things, and then some of your phrasing also with your kiddos is like, okay, I understand you're upset about that. We need to talk about that. But I really think we need to involve your father because he has a really good perspective on these things as well. So can that just wait until after supper when he's home? We have to use language like that frequently. Also because I can't solve it on the spot. And I actually really do need his opinion. But it also reminds them like, hey, we're a team. And that we're both capable of doing things. And he definitely has different strengths than I do. But we are a team effort. And it just makes the co-parenting more visual when you're involving them in just the actual chores as well and the conversations. And you're like, I need your dad present for this one. Let's just talk this over together. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think not only is it good for the kids, but I was kind of surprised at the numbers when I was writing the chapter at the number of working moms struggling with mental illness because of how much they're carrying, both not only at work, but the term that's used for all the additional work that women tend to do at home. It's called the second shift. Kind of like, okay, the first shift at work is over. Now you're carrying the bulk of it at home as well. And it shows that it's really not healthy. That it can lead to, of course, physical challenges, but also emotional and mental. And so I think it can feel sometimes like, well, I want to be loving, and so I need to do it all. But I think actually not just self-care, but loving our family is helping our husbands see and know, like, we're okay getting assistance sometimes because none of us can carry it all on our own.
That's very, very true. That's interesting about the second shift in there.
Mm-hmm.
Charity, thank you. Thank you for just kind of redefining what homemaking looks like for writing the book that you wanted to read. I think it's interesting how books start as like, wait, there's a resource here, and living that. I think you mentioned you lived it for 10 years. So it'll be interesting for our listeners to get to read your book and kind of redefine what it means for homemaking for their own families, to see some really cool entrepreneur ventures take off, some dreams start happening when you realize it doesn't have to look like the 50s, but it also doesn't have to look like some of the ways the world tells us to do it now too, that you have to just hyper concentrate on home or just hyper concentrate on work. So I'm really looking for this blended view, which is what we really prefer here at the Encourager Podcast too, is a blended view of what God wants for our individual families. Where can we go to get your book, Charity?
Well, there's a couple different places. I do have a website, and that's charitygibson.com. And people can go there and learn more about me and this project. And there's a link for the book. And you can also go directly to Amazon. So the main title is The Working Homemaker, and then the subtitle is Employed Christian Moms Desiring a Thriving Home Life.
God, that's a great second title. That's sometimes the whole meaning of the book is the second title.
As an English professor, yes, I love a good I love a good colon and then the second title.
I love it. Charity, I always end the podcast with asking, how can you encourage our encouragers?
Well, I would just encourage the women listening to continue the good work that I know you're all already doing, that the Lord sees what you're doing and He will honor and multiply it when we kind of submit whatever these individual goals are to just the authority of the calling that He's already placed on our life to honor Him, that He will be faithful in that.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Until next time, encouragers, we got this because He's got us. Thanks so much for tuning in. If the Encourager Podcast has helped or encouraged you in any way, please subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review. And then help us spread the message of encouragement and hope by sharing the podcast with others. Ready to bring more organization and joy into your life? The Encourager Academy helps you harmonize your home and work life through our online course and coaching programs. Our 5-system approach, me, food, family, work, and home, tackles your biggest obstacles, offering lifetime access to video lessons and guided worksheets. Learn at your own pace with practical tools and strategies. Enroll now at encourageracademy.com and use code WeGotThis for $50 off. Are you ready to finally create systems that help you thrive in both home and work life? Join my 10-week coaching cohort designed for busy women like you. Together, we'll create customized, foolproof systems for managing your home, business, and personal life with joy and purpose. With live coaching, practical tools, and a supportive community, you'll leave feeling organized, confident, and in control. Don't wait. Spots are limited to 10 women. Visit encouragerpodcast.com to apply.
The ship's drifting out of control. Get out of there now.
What happened?
His cord snapped. Some called it impossible.
Okay, Dave, I don't know where I am.
Others call it a miracle.
He's not. No, he's not.
Focus Features presents the inspirational true story
I got an idea.
that kept the world breathless.
This isn't working.
You can do this, buddy.
Starring Woody Harrelson
Now!
and Simu Liu.
I'm not losing a diver today.
Last Breath, based on a true story. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Only in theaters this Friday.